Okay, this is part 3 of the early church and early Rabbinical Judaism. Right now, as we left off our heroes, we find that there's been a major tension going on between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. We also discover that during the same time, we have a new sect, for lack of a better term, and there have been a lot of names in reference to it, but we're going to refer to the group that followed Yeshua inside Israel, or Israel, as the Ebionites, just for lack of, there's been so many terms, and the ones outside the land of Israel we'll call the Christians. Now what happens is that you find that between the years approximately 40 CE and, we'll say just for the sake of argument, 69 CE, you have two groups basically working hand in hand, both of them basically Pharisaical. You have the Ebionites, who are the followers of the Rabbi Yeshua ben Yosef, who they believe is the Moshiach. and if you went to Israel during that time, or Palestine as it was referred to by the Romans, you could not honestly pick out who is the follower of Yeshua versus the follower of Pharisaical Judaism. Probably because they were seen as just another split off of a sect within the rabbinate, within the Pharisaical groups. As you go outside into the diaspora, you discover our friend Paul. Now, about 13 years after the resurrection, and I'm using these terms just to stay, coherent here. We can argue whether it happened or not, and this is not the point here. This is a historical discussion, not a theological one. So what you have here is 13 to 14 years later, Paul, Saul of Tarsus, is traveling more into Rome and into the outskirts, way beyond the Middle East, and into the known world at the time, and starting groups, some of them associated with synagogues in the diaspora, some not. Now, before I continue, there is one thing that we have to discuss, which is the socioeconomic situation in Rome amongst the Roman citizens. In Rome and in the surrounding areas of which the Roman Empire were associated with, you have and I will of course link this to a book called the First Seven Ecumenical Councils, reference to the Council of Nicaea. In its preface, it discusses this in more detail, but I'm just going to skim over it. You have a large group of people who are part of basically a metropolitan upper middle class group in Rome. And just as we have today with people who live in the United States, and I'm using the United States because I live here, you find people who do not like their traditional belief system and will experiment with others. For example, Buddhism, yoga, Hinduism, and other religions that were interesting because they're different from what you are used to. This was happening 2,000 years ago. You had a large group of people who were Roman, who were born and raised Roman, and were not pleased or not satisfied with the religion that they had been taught, that being a pantheon of gods that were taken from the Greeks primarily. And you had a lot of people experimenting with other religions, one of them being Judaism. So here along comes a Jewish rabbi, Paul, followed Gamaliel, and he says he's a Pharisee. There's a good choice that he was probably part of the Pharisaical teaching, but if he was living today, I think he would be raised an Orthodox Jew and probably was a Reform or a Reconstructionist Jew. for lack of a better term. So you have this very modern person who's very Greek and Roman in his upbringing. He obviously knew Greek very well from the writings that we see in his language and his vocabulary. So you have this man with this new religion, Judaism with a twist, and the farther you go out from the center of Israel, you find that there are manifestations, morphing, changes of how the religion is seen, or how this new sect of Judaism is being received. Just like anyone who takes in something that is foreign to them and does not know necessarily the details of the culture in which they are, they start to apply their belief system onto a new foreign philosophy. And this is going on in Rome with Judaism. You have a lot of what we refer to amongst other Jews and Noachites as Alexandrian Jews. You have a lot of Jews that dressed like Romans, chose not to read in Hebrew but read in the Greek Septuagint, and were fairly modern people. And this was the primary. As closer you get to Rome, obviously, you have more metropolitan areas and you have more people living much more modernly. So anyway, so you find this acceptance of this new religion, this this Moshiach, who is Christos in Greek, Christ, and you have a Roman group of people living in a pantheon of gods, and the concept even that the Caesar himself is a son of God. So just as people take on religions like Buddhism and yoga and apply it to their modern world in their society, so did the Romans with this sect of Judaism. And what you find out is, as time goes on, up into, and the reason why I'm building a wall between 70 CE and what we're talking about right now, is because right at 70 CE everything changes. The Romans had a very, very free, very liberal view of religions. They didn't mind people believing in other religions as long as it didn't affect the state. This stops at 70 AD and exacerbates in 150 AD or CE, depending on how you look at it. So here you have it. You have in Eretz Israel, you have people who are practicing and believe that the Moshiach is Yeshua ben Yosef, and they have a very Jewish view and a very, both in their practice and also in their socioeconomic viewpoints. Their worldview is that of a Jewish person looking at a savior that is going to pull this Roman monkey off their backs. But then you have outside into the diaspora, you have all these people, taking in this new religion, to them a new religion, and applying their socioeconomic views. So what you're going to find out is, from that point forward, you have a very Jewish rabbinical practice amongst the Ebionites, and the Pauline, and I'm using this term, is my term, not anybody else's, Pauline missionary practices being in one way or another accepted by the population of Roman people within Rome as a novelty first, and then finally the metamorphosis will change to what we understand as modern Christianity. It's interesting to note that the Catholic Church, and I'm using the Catholic Church not because the Catholics changed, they never changed, they have never changed, and the Catholic view, as we're going to find out when we get to the Council of Nicaea, is pretty much set in stone. But they take on, they run with this ball that Paul points out, which is, it's okay, let's just accept your belief system and we'll just morph it into whatever we are, whatever our base belief systems are. So that's where we're at so far.